I think kind of a hot button issue right now, especially with the Southeastern Conference, is the over recruiting. Did you guys ever have to do that? Because I can see on one hand that teams have to be prepared, but it seems on the other hand that some kids are kind of getting dumped in the ditch by it.
I was only involved, not personally involved, but involved with a recruiting program at a couple of schools that we had that situation arise. Yeah. When you're on the fence and you're not sure, whether you're going to get a particular prospect or not, or recruit, that's when it occurs. Right. And generally when somebody makes a late decision, now you've oversigned.
Yeah.
So you've got to work through that and find one or two athletes a home somewhere rather than leave them hanging.
Right.
But for the most part, no. We pretty much what we would do is maneuver around the recruits.
Yeah.
In other words, you'd push hard, and then all of a sudden you had positive responses from somebody that you wanted a little bit more than this other one, and you'd pull back. You'd pull back a little bit on the guy you wanted, but not as much as the other guy.
Yeah.
And you try to maneuver around that way to stay within the number of scholarships that you had.
Yeah, it's funny. It's definitely like a courtship.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was different then because you didn't have all the electronics. You didn't have
texting
and cell phones,
mm-hmm.
and you didn't have computers. Everything was pick up the phone and talk.
Well, I mean, that leads me to exactly the next question. It seems like, I mean, the internet, I think in all aspects of life, has kind of taken the personal side out of a lot of things. I mean, and I feel like that's probably done that with recruiting too. You can get on YouTube and see if a guy's even worth picking up the phone, before you have to do that.
Yes, you can. As you know, you talk to somebody, whether it's face to face or on the phone. You can learn a lot about that particular individual.
Yeah.
When they're texting back and forth, maybe not quite as much, or sending an email or whatever
right.
it is. And that was important, that contact. But I would say today, kids growing up are so in tune to texting, and emails now are a thing of the past.
Yeah.
Everything is text messaging, and that's the communication that they like.
Yeah.
They rather not get on the phone and talk.
Yeah.
And it probably is more difficult for them to sit down like we are and have an interview or face-to-face conversation.
Yeah.
So I can see it going that way.
Yeah. I would say still though, I mean, I would say with players' parents that, and maybe their coaches and principals too, that face-to-face interaction is invaluable though. I mean, that's still what they're relying on.
I think absolutely.
Yeah.
You've got to make home visits and get to know, first of all, who the decision maker is. That's critical.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you can talk all you want to the athlete, but if you don't know who the decision maker is, and maybe it's him, but maybe it isn't. Maybe it's his mom or dad or uncle, cousin.
Right.
You need to find out who that person is and make sure they're in tune to what you're going to do for that youngster.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be his parent for the next 4 or 5 years.
Exactly. I think the internet, I mean, I've talked a lot about this with the other guys, has had a lot of negative impacts on college sports, the message boards and that type of thing. But I think it's had some positives too. I mean, you can see with Carolina, they put that whole study out, or the investigation out there, and then the NC State fans, found even more stuff in it. And do you think all these kind of scandals that are popping up right now in college football happened before, or is that just the internet? Did that stuff happen?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I would say there were things like that going on.
Yeah.
Was I a part of them? Did I see that? I've got to say no.
Right.
But I would venture to say there were things similarly going on. But because now the media is all over it and the communication is out there for everybody to see, that it's escalated in that capacity in terms of what the NCAA has access to.
Right. And I mean, I think one of the most ironic things about the Carolina situation was that the player kind of started the whole investigation himself with Twitter.
Yeah. I mean that's the thing. There's so much of that communication out there that you can take advantage of, and what it leads to.
Yeah. I know the NCAA too. I think with all this extra media pressure, I think they're trying to kind of get a little more serious about investigating and kind of punishing people
I think
that are doing.
definitely so, and rightfully so.
Yeah. What, did you feel the presence of the NCAA in the 70s, or were they kind of probably
Not
to be
really.
smaller? Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah.
Not really. Other than what you could do from a recruiting standpoint, and what you could do, in official visitations, having an athlete come to your campus,
Yeah.
the time limits, how many. Well, even home visits weren't limited. You had unlimited access to their home.
Yeah.
And visiting with them. Oh, you couldn't talk to an athlete on Fridays because they had their game days and things like that. But
Yeah.
it was very, very minimal.
Right. I mean, I think too. Well, another thing I was wondering too. I mean, would you guys have even had like a compliance officer? I mean, that's like a have-to position now, but.
Yes, within the athletic department structure,
Right.
There was somebody that oversaw what was going on, and if you had any doubt, you'd have conversations with him.
Yeah.
But it was pretty clean.
Yeah.
It was pretty clean.
Right. One of the things that kind of bugs me the most, and probably a lot of college fans with these type of situations, personally, I mean, I'm a Carolina fan, and those guys are gone. They're in the NFL. And now the school's stuck with it. The fans are stuck with this situation. I mean, that seems like one of the worst parts about it, I think.
I agree. I don't know how you get away from it. They're holding the university responsible,
Right.
Rather than the particular individual, even though the individual gets penalized, but then they move on.
Yeah.
But the university's still hanging there, trying to pick up the pieces of what was done.
Right.
I don't know how you can get away from that,
Right.
because the NCAA focuses on the institution,
Right.
and having the institution who has hired this person hold that person accountable. And if that doesn't happen, then they turn to the university. So that's.
Yeah, I mean, you look at like.
Even though the university will fire an
Right.
assistant coach or a head coach or a whole staff, they're still ultimately responsible, which is sad.
Yeah, or say looking at a season's record book and all the wins are voided or whatever. You can't really escape that, I guess.
But I guess they're responsible, the whole whoever that is, or committee, the whole that head coach responsible for his program.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Pete Carroll and Monty Kiffin. I mean, what was that like? Because I think Monty Kiffin is one of the most respected defensive guys in the NFL, and then Pete Carroll's always been kind of this wizard kid, that just does things like the exact opposite of what you would expect.
The thing that I remember back then was Monty was a tremendous defensive football coach. This was his first experience. I don't know if you're recording this.
Yeah.
This was his first experience as a head football coach, and he had just come from Nebraska. And it was funny. I guess I was there on campus about 3 days when I first went there, and Monty took the impression, or took the feeling, that nobody knew him.
Yeah.
Coming from Nebraska as a defensive coordinator. So I don't know if you remember, but he took on the role of being the Lone Ranger. And he mounted a white horse, and he had all the Lone Ranger garb on, and he rode around the campus and came into the student union, where all of the fans and everybody in the media watched him, and they played the Lone Ranger theme song.
Right.
as he rode in, and he considered himself, who is that masked man?
Yeah.
It's Monty Kiffin, the Lone Ranger. So it's kind of kooky, but that was Monty. Monty loved little things like that. He fought Joe Frazier in the ring. He jumped out of a helicopter, but the helicopter was only 2 feet off the ground. Things like that to gather interest to the program. But I guess what I'm getting at, Monty was truly one of the best defensive football coaches that I've been around. And I guess as a head coach, I came in as offensive coordinator, and we had to really work together to determine what we really wanted to do with the offense. So it became almost a teacher thing as to how to implement an offense, over the spring practice and in the summer. How do you get an offense implemented? And it's different than implementing into the program a defensive scheme.
Right. And coming from Nebraska, you probably would have been smash mouth, I guess. Was that sort of your style?
I guess one of the things that I found different, coming from East Carolina, we ran the wishbone,
Mm-hmm.
and the wishbone is a wide open offense. People think it's real conservative because you're running the ball, but you put so much pressure on the perimeter of the defense by running option football.
Right.
And reading inside. It was truly a triple
They have to make a lot of
offense.
decisions.
They had to make a lot of decisions. The potential for laying the ball on the ground, either with a fumble, mishandling when you're reading or pitching. It was great. Monty coached from a defensive perspective, which opened my eyes because I was a gambler. I wanted to move the ball down the field, do whatever we can to score. But Monty tried to control because he always looked at things like, well, the defense could do this, the defense could do that.
Right.
You know, how are we going to run this formation and these plays from that? So it was kind of an educational process at that point to get him acclimated to how you want to look at this thing from an offensive standpoint.
Yeah. Y'all were probably good foils then.
Yeah. So we had a lot of good conversations over all of that.
Yeah. And Pete Carroll, I mean, he would have been pretty young then, like you said.
Yes. Yeah. But you could see Pete. I mean, what you see of Pete Carroll through the media is Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
He has more fun coaching, and the players just thoroughly enjoyed being around him.
Yeah.
Just a comedian, you know, one-liners and very automated, you know, just a good guy to be around, real positive.
Yeah, yeah. What did you anticipate his success that he would have had?
I felt if he was committed and stayed in coaching, then I could see that.
Yeah.
You know, you just don't know. Some guys after 4 or 5 years go do something else, but he truly enjoyed football, enjoyed the relationships, and was a good football coach. So obviously he moved on, and to say, yeah, I could see that if he truly stayed with the game, he was going to be very successful.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Okay, so you left college football in you said the early '80s.
I left after the '81 season.
Okay,
and went into business.
And so you tell me about what your job was.
I went to work for a hospital company that manufactured and distributed healthcare products, American Hospital Supply out of Chicago. And I ended up hooking up with them, oddly enough. I was really close with a fellow in administration at NC State in the placement office that whenever I had a recruit come in, I would make an appointment to bring that recruit to sit down and talk to this individual. And he would talk to them about the curriculums and what's out there from a job perspective when you graduate out of this degree, out of that degree, or this curriculum program. So I went to him when I made a decision to get out of coaching, and we had a long conversation.
So you had the same conversation the recruits had.
Absolutely, and because I didn't know anything about education and coaching, and so he kind of gave me some real good direction, and ended up hooking up with American Hospital Supply to get my feet wet. I sold for a year, and then they moved me into management, and that was field management. And this is what I was saying earlier, that the similarities of what I did as a football coach and recruiting was basically the same thing with different words, different terminologies.
Yeah.
As an example, as a manager, I'm reading computer printouts. Instead of looking at tendencies of formations and plays and down and distances, I'm looking at products and services. You know, what's profitable, what's selling, what's not, where do we need to focus our attention from a sales team standpoint, those types of things. And from a recruiting standpoint, I took away, when we're going to see a customer, who's the decision maker? Who do we need to see? Who do we need to make sure understands what we've got from a product standpoint and services standpoint to get a contract, to get their business?
The coach or
and
the
what
parent.
needs to be done, same thing.
Yeah.
And then my sales team, I'm motivating them just like players.
Mm-hmm.
I'm watching over them, I'm suggesting this, suggesting that, teaching them, and keeping them motivated to perform.
Yeah.
Uncanny,
yeah.
really.
Did you see that initially, or did it kind of just dawn on you?
Reading up on sales, reading up on, I said, this is what I've been doing. I've been doing this for 17 years. This piece of cake.
Yeah, that's funny. I know coaches get fulfillment from teaching and being competitive, so I guess those were things that maybe less on the teaching, but definitely the competitive side, you could probably find that in that
Well,
sort of work.
I look back in what was important to me as a coach, Brad, and it was teaching. Not teaching in classroom, teaching my players.
Yeah.
And I really prided myself on the fact that I wanted to teach them technique, teach them how to do things, motivate them, so they would want to perform. And I think, as I look back, one of the things I truly enjoyed in coaching, winning football games, that's what we were paid to do, and that was fun, particularly if you were an underdog.
Yeah.
But watching a young man really truly try to do what you're telling them to do and asking them to do, and then finally the light goes on, and boy, they take hold, and then watching them enjoy that and having success meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's the teaching part of it, and the influence that you can have on a young man's life during that 4 or 5 year period.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, you kind of, I feel like, made that decision so you could have that impact on your own kids' lives, right?
Absolutely, and I think that's probably why, I stayed in college coaching rather than exploring into
Right.
the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I look back on a young man that I recruited out of Northern Virginia when I was at East Carolina. Boy's name was Clay Burnett. He was from a single parent. He had a mom, but he didn't have a father living at home. And I recruited him. He was a high school quarterback, but a real good youngster, and recruited him down to East Carolina, knowing he wasn't going to be a quarterback in our wishbone offense.
Right.
He was a big, tall, lanky boy, but we made him a tight end, and he was a team leader. I mean, everybody looked up to him, and he motivated, and so forth and so on. Long story short, he graduated from East Carolina, went to their medical school, became a cardiovascular surgeon, and then became a customer of ours when I was in the hospital supply business.
Right.
And I remember going down to Savannah where he was heading up the Georgia Heart Institute. And I'm walking down the corridor, and he spots me, Coach Kupec. And here's a guy that's a cardiovascular surgeon, and we're talking about the days back at East Carolina.
Yeah.
To me, and I guess I saw him about 5 years ago, and he's still thanking me for taking him out of the environment that he was living in, and giving him an opportunity to go to college. And to me, that's what college football is all about.
Right. So I mean, that seemed like that would have been a hard decision, though, to leave that behind. I mean, I guess your family would have made it a lot easier because that's an obvious priority. But.
Yeah, and I wanted to do that with my sons more than I was able to.
Right.
I mean, a college football coach back then was working 80, 90-hour weeks.
Yeah.
So you didn't have a whole lot of time to spend with your own family, your kids or your wife even. So when I got out of coaching, I went right back into coaching in the rec leagues. Right. And I had both my sons that were playing for me, and that was probably the most enjoyable time that I had, as I was able to work with them as they grew up and got involved with school activities and athletics.
Right. How old were they when you quit coaching?
They were both in elementary school.
Okay.
I guess my oldest was just getting started in junior high, and my youngest was still in elementary school.
Cool. That's awesome.